1 year ago this week, Los Angeles burned, and what's happening right now in those burn scars isn't reconstruction. It's a corporate feeding frenzy disguised as recovery. Before we go any further, subscribe to Capital Prime and hit that notification bell. What I'm about to show you is something the mainstream media is barely covering, and you need to know what's really happening to these communities. Here's the number that should make your blood run cold. Fewer than a dozen homes rebuilt out of more than 13,000 homes destroyed in an entire year. Let that sink in for a moment. January 7th, 2025, the Palisades and Eaton fires tore through Los Angeles County with hurricane-force winds exceeding 80 miles per hour. The fires burned for weeks. When they were finally extinguished on January 31st, the scale of destruction was almost incomprehensible. Here are the real numbers, and I need you to pay attention to these because they tell a story the official statistics hide. The death toll isn't 31, it's 440 people. Yes, 31 died from direct contact with the flames, but researchers at Columbia University's National Center for Disaster Preparedness tracked the real impact: heart attacks triggered by stress, lung disease from smoke inhalation, breakdowns in healthcare systems, mental health crises that turned fatal, 440 human beings dead, more than 200,000 people. Think about that, 200,000 people forced from their homes. As of October, 70% were still displaced, still living in hotels, RVs, temporary rentals, or with relatives. Nearly a year later, over 17,000 homes destroyed, seriously damaged, or rendered uninhabitable. An area of 59 square miles, larger than Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, and Universal Studios combined, turned to ash. So what's happened in the year since? Where's the recovery? Where's the rebuilding? Here's what we know. As of this week, Los Angeles County has issued permits for about 2,600 homes. Sounds okay, right? That's about 1 permit for every 5 homes destroyed. But here's what they're not telling you. Asterisks, only 12 homes. 12 have actually been completed and are livable. About 900 more are under construction. That means 96% of destroyed properties remain empty lots. Why? Let me walk you through what's actually happening on the ground, because the details here are devastating. First, insurance. The dirty secret nobody wants to talk about is that even people with insurance can't afford to rebuild. Insurance companies are paying out based on pre-fire valuations and outdated coverage limits. Meanwhile, construction costs in Los Angeles have exploded to anywhere from $400 to $1,000 per square foot. Do the math. If your insurance gives you $800,000, but it costs $1.5 million to rebuild, you're stuck. You're paying rent on a temporary place. You're still paying the mortgage on a house that doesn't exist, and you don't have the money to rebuild. Joy Chen runs the Eaton Fire Survivors Network, a group of 10,000 survivors. She told reporters, we're seeing huge gaps between what insurance is paying out and what it will actually cost to rebuild. As of December, less than 20% of people who lost their homes had even closed out their insurance claims. Without that closure, they can't commit to rebuilding projects that easily exceed $1 million. And this is where the story gets darker. Because while families are trapped in this bureaucratic nightmare, unable to afford rebuilding, unable to move forward, corporate investors are circling like vultures. New data from multiple sources reveals something shocking. 44% of properties sold in the burn zones have been purchased by corporate entities, disasters, not families. Not people who used to live there. Corporations. In Pacific Palisades, investors bought 48 of 119 lots sold in the third quarter. That's over 40%. In Altadena, it was 44%. In Malibu, also 44%. And here's the kicker. The national average for corporate ownership of homes is around 2.02%. In these fire zones, it's asterisk, double asterisk that. 8 companies alone control 40% of all corporate purchases in the Eaton fire zone. 14 companies control nearly 23% of purchases in the Palisades. This isn't a diverse market. This is monopoly formation happening in real time. Who are these buyers? Not your typical home buyers. These are small to mid-sized developers, independent builders, and what the industry politely calls mom and pop investors. Translation, people with cash looking to flip burned land for profit. And the biggest player? New Zealand billionaires Matt and Nick Mowbray, who've spent $128 million buying 16 burned beachfront lots in Malibu. They're betting they can triple that investment by building luxury homes and selling them for an average of $25 million each. Let's talk about what's happening to property values, because this is where you see the wealth transfer in action. In Pacific Palisades, the average home sale before the fires was $3.6 million. By October of last year, it had dropped to $2.4 million. That's a 33% crash. But Altadena got hit even harder. Average home values went from $1.8 million to $684,000. That's a 62% plunge. Analysts calculate the fires resulted in a loss of $8.3 billion in home values across these communities. Billion, with a B. And who's benefiting from these crashed prices? The corporate investors with cash. They're making lowball offers to desperate homeowners. Some families are rejecting these offers, but many, especially elderly residents or people who are underinsured, are signing on the dotted line because they're out of options. Zaire Calvin lost his family's home in Altadena. His sister died in the fire. He told reporters, if rebuilding becomes a race for capital instead of a return home for families, then disaster has been basically repackaged as opportunity for those with the most resources. It's like they're preying on us while we're still praying for hope and help. Let me tell you about the people who are managing to rebuild. Because their stories reveal just how impossible this is for most families. Ted Kerner, 67 years old, Altadena. His home was reduced to ash and 2 chimneys. With his insurance payout tied up in bureaucracy, he liquidated 80% of his retirement holdings, his entire future, to pay contractors and rebuild quickly. One of the first to finish, right before Thanksgiving. Think about what that means. A 67-year-old man had to wipe out nearly his entire retirement savings just to rebuild his home. Or take Rebecca and Janny Zandovskis. They're living in a Winnebago RV with their 2 dogs on the burned lot they bought in 2019. Their rebuild cost, $692,000, about $400 per square foot. The only reason they can afford it is because Rebecca works for Genesis Builders, who guaranteed them that price. If it wasn't for that, she said, we wouldn't be able to rebuild. These are the lucky ones, the ones with resources, connections, or employers willing to help. And we need to talk about who's being pushed out, because the data on this is stark. UCLA's Latino Policy and Politics Institute did research showing that as of August, 7 out of 10 Altadena homeowners whose property was severely damaged hadn't begun taking steps to rebuild or sell. But here's the crucial finding. Asterisk Black homeowners were 73% more likely than others to have taken no action. Why? It's not because they don't want to rebuild. It's because they don't have the resources. They're underinsured at higher rates. They have less access to secondary financing. They're being offered lowball prices by investors who know they're desperate. Altadena has been a historically Black community for generations. What we're watching in real time is the displacement of that community through economic pressure. Signs popped up all over Altadena after the fires saying Altadena is not for sale. But the reality, hundreds of families have concluded that rebuilding isn't in their budget. And in nearly half of recent deals for empty lots, they're selling to corporations. Let's talk about the bureaucratic maze that's keeping people from rebuilding, even when they have the money. California has some of the strictest building codes in the country for wildfire zones, what they call Zone 0 requirements. New homes have to have fire-resistant roofing, tempered glass windows, fire-resistant siding, interior and exterior sprinkler systems, and systems to coat the structure in flame-retardant foam. All of that is good. It makes homes safer. But it also adds massive costs and delays. One homeowner told Fox News, dealing with the insurance company and getting the smoke out and restoration has become a full-time job. The infrastructure isn't even there yet in many neighborhoods. Roads need to be rebuilt. Power lines need to go underground to prevent future fires. Water systems need to be upgraded. One Altadena resident said they want to build first and infrastructure later, and it should be infrastructure first and build later. The result? Even families who want to rebuild and have the money are stuck waiting for permits, inspections, and basic infrastructure that still doesn't exist. Jeff Schlegelmilch directs the National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia Climate School. He's studied disasters for decades. Here's what he told researchers. Rebuilding is chronically slow in the areas affected by the fires, with only a small fraction of the homes destroyed under construction a year later. This leaves communities in limbo while the world moves on. He added something that should terrify all of us. It is unlikely these communities will receive additional federal funds for rebuilding, as we have seen in past disasters. Why? Because FEMA and disaster recovery funding exists in what he called a state of persistent uncertainty. Translation, the federal government is stepping back. And the insurance industry, it's reeling from this and other disasters without a clear pathway towards solvency. Multiple insurance companies have already pulled out of California entirely. Schlegelmilch believes we're approaching what he calls a breaking point, the moment when the current system of disaster recovery completely collapses and we're forced to create something new. Whether the LA wildfires will be that breaking point or whether we have further to go remains to be seen, he said. Here's something they're not talking about enough. The tons of ash and debris left behind were laden with toxic materials. Many of these homes were built before 1975. They contained lead paint and asbestos, both now banned by the EPA. When those homes burned, all of that became toxic dust coating everything. But the EPA had to come in and remove hazardous materials first, asbestos, batteries, propane tanks. By September, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had cleared nearly 12,000 lots of contaminated debris. But soil contamination remains a massive concern. Families who do rebuild are building on land that may still contain toxins. The long-term health impacts are unknown. And then there's the question of who pays for all of this. Multiple lawsuits are targeting Southern California Edison, claiming its equipment sparked the Eaton fire in Altadena. Pauline Ching, one of the first homeowners to begin rebuilding, is part of a class action lawsuit. Her rebuild will cost $350,000 more than her insurance covers. She's suing to close that gap. Separate lawsuits are targeting the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power over the Palisades fire, alleging they failed to provide adequate water and fire prevention. LADWP has denied responsibility. Victims are suing a county contractor over failed evacuation alerts in a predominantly Black neighborhood where at least 18 people died. These lawsuits will take years to resolve. In the meantime, families are stuck in limbo. So what does the future look like for these communities? Here's the brutal reality. Most experts estimate only 25 to 30% of residents will actually rebuild. The rest will walk away. The deciding factor isn't desire, it's math. Insurance disputes, labor shortages, permitting delays, and skyrocketing costs have made it functionally impossible for most people to return. Jana Cole, a longtime Pacific Palisades resident, told Fox News, "What really breaks my heart is people like our next-door neighbor. They were in their late 70s, early 80s. They'd lived in their house for 60 years. It was their original house, and they were pillars of the community. And people like that aren't coming back." The communities that eventually emerge from this will be wealthier, whiter, and more corporate owned than what existed before. That's not speculation. That's what the data already shows happening. This story isn't really about Los Angeles. It's about what happens when climate disasters collide with economic inequality in America. We're watching in real time what disaster capitalism looks like. Families displaced, wealth extracted. Communities destroyed not by fire, but by the systems that were supposed to help them recover. And it's going to happen again and again and again. Between 1990 and 2020, the number of homes built in California's wildland-urban interface, the high-risk fire zones, grew by 1.3 million homes. We keep building in places we know will burn. In 2024 alone, the United States had 27 confirmed weather disaster events, with losses exceeding $1 billion each. Climate change is making these disasters more frequent and more severe, and our systems for dealing with them are completely inadequate. Jeff Schlegelmilch put it this way: we have the lessons we need to do better and recover better, but there is a stubbornness to learning and applying them. 1 year after the most destructive wildfires in Los Angeles history, what we're witnessing isn't recovery, it's displacement. It's wealth transfer. It's the transformation of communities through economic pressure masked as market forces. 12 homes rebuilt, 96% of properties still empty, 44% bought by corporations, property values crashed by 30% to 62%. Black homeowners, 73% more likely to have taken no action, 440 people dead when you count the real toll. These aren't just statistics, these are people's lives. These are communities being erased. Subscribe to Capital Pride now. Turn on notifications. This story is far from over. The next wildfire season is already beginning. The same patterns will repeat unless something fundamental changes. Drop a comment. Tell me, do you think these communities will ever truly recover? Or are we watching the permanent displacement of working and middle-class families from Los Angeles? Share this video. People need to know what's really happening. This is Capital Prime. I'll see you in the next investigation.